Good morning. Welcome to the channel. My name is Susan, and we're doing Exodus today. And this is a continuation of the overview series that the Lord has asked me to do on the books of the Bible. I've done Genesis, and I'll link the videos below. It'd be good for you to give those a watch. And also because in Exodus, we're picking up where we left off in Genesis. So it's just a good idea to, have that fresh in your minds before watching this. So I do recommend that. So in the interest of time, we're going to jump right in. But we're not jumping anywhere without the Holy Spirit. So will you pray with me? Father, I thank you, first of all, Father, for this day. It's a day that you have made, God, and we will all rejoice and we'll be so glad in it, Lord, because for the fact that I'm speaking and for your son or your daughter listening, Lord, it means that you have something special that you've put in this day for us. And so we thank you for it. We thank you for the breath of life that you've once again graced us with, Lord. And we pray, Father, that you will walk with us today. Help us to accomplish that thing that you've placed in this day specifically for each of us. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity to be here in front of your child. And I thank you for your child, God. I ask you, Lord, that as I open my mouth, it will be your words that come out. And your Holy Spirit will take it and deliver it to your child in a very personal manner, dear God. Because only your Spirit, Father, can open eyes and ears in the Spirit, can open hearts, can soften hearts, even replace hardened hearts with human hearts. So, Father, I pray that you will minister to their hearts so that they will receive you gladly, and that there will be an urge and a desire in them to know more about you. And while you're there, Father, I ask that you bless them. I ask that you bless them. I plead the blood of Jesus on myself, on this message, and on that child of yours that's listening to me right now, Lord, listening to you. And I ask all this in Jesus' mighty and matchless name. Amen. Amen. Okay, so Exodus. Again, I don't think any of us could come up with a more perfect name for this book than Exodus, because it literally means, I believe it's two Greek words. Ex means out, and Hodus, Hodus, means way, path, or road. Looking at my notes, this stuff is too important not to, sit with the Lord and take notes. So this Exodus literally means the road out of, in this case, Egypt, for God's people. Okay, this documents the exit, the movement, the movement of God's people out of the land of Egypt. Okay, and where we left off in Genesis is that Israel had died. Formerly known as Jacob, Israel had died. Joseph, his son, had also died. Right. And that's important because the Pharaoh at the time that Joseph was alive, we're dealing with a different Pharaoh now, right? Because Pharaoh is just a role. So there's a different, because it's been hundreds of years, y'all. And the interesting fact, and the Lord made sure it was stated in his word, it was 430 years to the day from when the people of Israel went into Egypt to now, to the day that they left. 430 days to the 430 years to the day. And I believe that the word says that because the Lord wants to make a point that that was his hand. He had predestined that. That's the hand of God. All right, so it's been hundreds of years. The guy who is now Pharaoh, Joseph does not mean to him what the Pharaoh of Joseph's time meant, right? Because that Pharaoh had seen Joseph come in, where none of his wise men were able to tell him the dream interpretation. He saw Joseph come in, tell him what they meant, and tell him what to do about them, right? So Pharaoh was so impressed. He was like, "You're the guy. You got the job. Here is my my signet ring. You are second in command only to me." That Pharaoh is no longer around. The guy in charge now, like history to him, it's like ancient history. Yeah, there was a famine and some guy, you know. But now, what he can see is that there's this nation inside of his country, and they've grown because the Israelites, the word tells us that they had grown, and so the Pharaoh, he didn't know anything about Joseph's family. All he saw was this great people living in his country, and he became fearful. What if we get attacked, and what if this people, Israel, join our enemies? It's not going to be good for us, right? So let's enslave them. And that wasn't enough. He even went as far as to try to commit genocide, because he said to the Israel midwives, when you help them to give birth and it's a boy child, make sure that that child does not live, right? But the midwives, they feared God more than they feared Pharaoh, so they decided to not listen to Pharaoh, right? So they told Pharaoh, when he called them again, he's like, why the boys living? They said, you know, the women are strong. By the time we get there, they're done, and you know, what can we do at that point, right? So then Pharaoh decides that he's going to give an order for all the boys, the little baby boys, to be thrown in the river. Okay, and that's Exodus 1, right? So, one, the people are enslaved; they're not free, and they're under the threat of being wiped out, basically. All right. So we see in chapter 2, Moses was born. He's born to Levite parents. Okay, that's going to become significant later on. And his mom saw something in her little boy, and she decided that she was going to hide him. The time came when she realized she couldn't hide him anymore. So she decided that she was going to make a little baby boat for him. But she took a basket, sealed it up, put him in it, put him in the river, right? And his sister Miriam, Moses' sister, watched to see what was going to happen with him. Who came along but Pharaoh's daughter to bathe in the river, right? She discovers a baby and decides, you know, that she's going to take this baby and look after him. Miriam, Moses' sister, this had to be a move of God. Went to him and went to the princess and said, hey, do you want me to find a woman to come and help you take care of the baby? So the princess said yes, and off she went and got her mother. And so Moses' mother was able to take care of her baby. The princess even said to her, I'll pay you. So here it was, by the hand of God, that Moses' mother was able to take care of him and get paid for it. God is funny sometimes. All right, so so here Moses is actually being raised in the household by a family member of the man who would have him not be alive. Okay, so Moses grew up, and the Lord is intentional in this, because who would be better than a Hebrew boy who was raised in the house of Pharaoh to go and speak to this Pharaoh later on, right? Moses didn't know it till he knew it, till God called him, but that's our God. that he grew up, right? And I would imagine that since his mother helped to raise him, that he knew he was Hebrew. And here he was, being exposed to the culture, the language, the customs of the Egyptians, right? So one day he sees one of his fellow Israelites being beaten by an Egyptian taskmaster. And it touched his heart. And he just, he hit the Egyptian in him, right? And didn't know he had been seen. But the next day, he saw two Israelites, I think it was two Israelites that were having a dispute. And he tried to, intervene. And the one said to him, "What are you going to do? Me like the Egyptian yesterday?" When Moses realized that somebody knew what he did, he ran. Okay, he left Egypt. And he went to Midian. Okay, and he met Zipporah. Hope I'm saying that right. And he had his first son, Gershon. All right, so chapter 3. Moses was taking care of his father-in-law's flock, okay? And he encountered God in the burning bush. And this was at Mount Horeb. God called to him. Well, he came close to see what was going on, because the bush was on fire, but it wasn't burning. It was just a strange occurrence. So he came to investigate, and the Lord called to him and said, "Take off your sandals. The ground you're standing on is holy," right? So God said to him, "Listen, I've heard the cry of my people, and I know their sorrows, and I've come down to deliver them to," this is what God says, "to a land flowing with milk and honey." Okay? And Moses was like, I don't think I'm the guy. I don't think I'm the guy you want. But the Lord promised that he would be with them. Of course, Moses was like, "Well, who are you?" And God said to him, "I am who I am. I am who I am." Because you see, God is his character. And he's so many things that how do you put that into a name, right? So when the Lord says to Moses, "I am who I am," he says, "Who should I tell the people, or send, who should I tell them is sending me?" And he said, "I am. I am," right? God told Moses ahead of time, Pharaoh's going to resist you. As hard as it was for Moses going back and forth and dealing with the people and everything that would ensue, the Lord tried to prepare him. He said, "He's going to resist you." And he said, these are God's words, "He would strike Egypt with all my wonders, which I will do in its midst." He also told Moses that they would not leave Egypt empty-handed. They would plunder the Egyptians. And they did. Okay? What I find interesting about this is this going into Egypt for God's people, this was not the first time. When Israel went with the remaining of his sons to join Joseph in Egypt, this was not the first time that had happened. Abraham had gone to Egypt. The thing that drove them was famine. I find that that's not a coincidence. All right, so the Lord told them that you're not going to leave empty-handed. Now in 4, Moses again expressed doubt to the Lord, and the Lord showed him the signs of his rod turning into a snake, and his hand. The Lord told him, "Put your hand inside your cloak." And when he pulled it out, his hand was leprous. right? And of course, the Lord restored it. He restored, he told him to pick up the snake by the tail. The snake turned back into his rod. And so Moses again, he was like, I don't speak very well. Apparently, he had something with his speech. And the Lord said, the Lord, will be your mouthpiece. I'm paraphrasing. And then he designated Aaron, Moses' brother, to be his physical mouthpiece. So don't worry about what you're going to say. I got that part. And then Aaron will speak the words for you. Okay. So Moses took off to go to do what the Lord said to do. Right. And there was also an incident in chapter 4 where apparently there was something the Lord asked Moses to do, and it was in reference to circumcision, and it was not done. And the Lord decided that he was gonna strike Moses, and his wife stepped in and did it really quickly, and the Lord relented. So the Lord is serious. When I read this, it reminded me of I can't remember who it was that told the Israelites, don't think that because, wait a minute, I'm trying to think, was that John the Baptist that told them, don't let this idea that you're Abraham's sons cause you to think that you don't have to be obedient, like you're just in because you're sons of Abraham. And he said, God is able to raise up these stones on the ground. He can make sons out of these stones. So don't think that, you're special, but you're not that special. Okay. So in chapter 5, we see that Moses meets with Pharaoh for the first time. And of course, here comes Moses, let my people go. And Pharaoh is like, I don't know, who is this God that you speak? I don't know this God of yours. And, I can just imagine God was like, I'm glad you asked. I'm going to show you who I am, Pharaoh. By the time I get done, not only will you know, your people will know. My people will know. All the people in these parts will know. Okay, so I got you. So not only did Pharaoh say no, I don't know who you're talking about, but he told his taskmasters to take away the straw that the Israelites were provided with, and they used the straw to make bricks, to, build the stuff that they were being not asked, told. They were slaves. So now they had to go out and find their own straw, right? And their quota would not change. So of course, what happened? The people of Israel went to Aaron and Moses like, really? They were hot with Moses, and Moses, of course, took it to the Lord. Sometimes the only way for God to really show, and we see this in Exodus, the Lord is going to show his might through the things that we encounter. Okay? So note that things got worse for the Israelites, and sometimes things will get worse so that the Lord can show up in a mighty way. Okay? All right, so in chapter 6, the Lord said, okay, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. And he also said, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. Yeah, the Lord said, okay, I'm going to show Pharaoh. In chapter 7, when Moses had protested again in chapter 6, I guess the reality of it hit Moses, and God said, see, I have made you as God to Pharaoh, and Aaron, your brother, shall be your prophet. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart and multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. So the Lord himself hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he could show them, Pharaoh, us, as we read this, as we talk about this today, thousands of years later. Because if Moses had gone to Pharaoh and Pharaoh said, okay, y'all go, Exodus would be a very different book, right? So in front of Pharaoh, the Lord told Moses to throw down the staff. It turned into a snake. The sorcerers threw down theirs. And what did God do? He had Moses' staff, the snake, eat the other snakes. And we see the first plague, which was the waters being turned into blood. The Lord told Moses to stretch his staff over the waters, and the waters turned into blood. People could not use the water. Chapter 8, we see the second plague, frogs. Again, the magicians did the same thing, but only God could undo it. So Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron, and they cried out to God. The frogs stopped, right? They died. They went away. Okay. Pharaoh went back on his word. We see this pattern. Every time he had to call Aaron and Moses to undo a plague, he promised he would do, what the Lord said. At first, he started in stages. Oh, you can go, but leave your young ones. Y'all can go, but leave the flock, right? But he went back on his word. And so we see the third plague, which was lice. The Lord caused the lice to come and torment the Egyptians. The magicians couldn't copy God this time. Even they turned to Pharaoh and said, "This is the finger of God." So here we are, the third plague, and even the magicians are like, they're seeing God. Pharaoh was like, So God caused the fourth plague, was flies. Flies took over everything. Now, I am not, when a fly gets into my house, I have no peace until it's destroyed. So can you imagine wherever you live covered with flies? Anyway, God made the point and said, listen, Pharaoh, my people over in Goshen, remember Goshen was in Egypt. So with all of this happening in Egypt, God said, he made the point to Pharaoh and said, this will not affect my people. My people will be set apart, and this will not affect them. All right. He said, this is in verse 23 of chapter 8. He says, I will make a difference between my people and your people. Pharaoh promised that he would comply again, and of course he relented again. So the Lord came with the fifth plague in chapter 9, and this was their livestock in Egypt were diseased. All right, and this again happened only to the Egyptians. And then we see again the same pattern. He said he would, then he didn't. Pharaoh would say he's going to do it, then he would go back on his word. So we see the sixth plague where they broke out in boils. And this time God asked Moses to take ashes and blow it into the air. And it became fine dust, and it caused boils to break out on their skin. Same thing. Pharaoh refused. Seventh plague, the Lord sent hail. This is very destructive hail. This is not like your little garden variety hail. And this time, the Lord said to Pharaoh, listen, this, even as much as these 7 plagues have been hard thus far, if I had really stretched out my hand against you and your people, you would all be gone. And this is the Lord's word. He said, "But indeed, I have raised you up, that I may show my power in you, and that my name may be declared in all the earth." So sometimes the Lord will raise up a thing so that he can show his power. Okay? So don't be, we walk by faith and not by sight. Don't be intimidated by what you see. Sometimes the Lord will cause it to happen so he can show himself to you and to everyone around you and to the enemy. Listen, by this time, some of Pharaoh's people were like, we're not playing with this guy because he's not playing. They went ahead and took their animals in so that they would not be by these gigantic hailstones that were falling. And it was hail mingled with fire. This was not your everyday hail that, you may get a crack in your windshield. No, this was destructive. And of course, God spared Goshen. None of this affected Goshen. Moses called them, said he would let them go, called Moses and Aaron to cause the hail to stop. Of course, he went back on his word. So the Lord caused the 8th plague to come in, which was locusts. And of course, locusts is destructive in that it destroyed their crops and stuff like that. So the Lord attacked their food supply. And the Lord explained why he hardened Pharaoh's heart, right? And even Pharaoh's servants was like, how long are you going to let this happen? You need to let them go. Pharaoh called Moses in again, saying, okay, stop the locusts. And this time he said, I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. So it looks like, he was finally going to let them go. As soon as the locusts left, he went back on his word again. And so we see the 9th plague happening. We're in chapter 10. So in chapter 10, we had the 8th and the 9th plague, okay? And the 9th plague was darkness for 3 days. We're talking about no sun, no moon, no stars, no nothing. Darkness so that you can't even see your hands in front of you. Now Pharaoh called them in and said, okay, y'all can leave, but leave the flocks. Moses refused because, hey, we need our flocks. We're leaving, Pharaoh. Pharaoh sent him away, angry because he wouldn't agree to the terms. And he said to Moses, leave, for in the day that you see my face, you will die. And I just find that so ironic when you look at how things ended up, So the Lord had one more plague. This one is the death of the firstborn. And so the Lord told Moses to get the Israelites to ask their neighbors for gold and silver, right? This is how they were going to plunder the Egyptians. This is how they were not going to leave empty-handed. But the Lord had already told them that Pharaoh will not heed you, so that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. All right? So, that's chapter 11. The 10th plague was announced. All right? In chapter 12, we see the Passover instituted. And the Lord told them that they were to keep this as a memorial and to tell their descendants. You know, that there was the oral tradition at the time where things happen, you tell your kids, they tell their kids, and so on. So the Lord told them to make sure that they tell their descendants. And this is how come you and I are sitting here today talking about Exodus. The Lord wants us to know what he did. And like I said, it's a reason for that. He wants us to know that he's the same God. Pharaoh thought he was so powerful, and I don't know your God. Look at it though, right? The Lord wants us to know this. When he said to Moses, I am who I am, this is what he's talking about. He wants us to know him. He wants us to know that he has all the power and all the glory over any situation you and I can face. Nothing we face is too big for him. 430 years of slavery. We see later on these people were so, they became so connected to this enslavement that they, many times, as soon as something went wrong, they were, complaining to Moses to take them back to Egypt. You should have left us there, right? They thought that this was it for them. The Lord wants us to see that when he steps in, it doesn't matter who says no. Pharaoh, you could say no as many times as you want. My people are coming out of there. And they're coming out of there on the day that I have ordained. Okay? So, the Passover, the Lord said that this would be the beginning of months for his people, right? This is like a fresh start. It's a fresh start. This is where your year is going to begin from now onward. And he told Moses about them preparing the Passover lamb. All right, he gave them instructions of how they were to prepare it, how they were to eat it. They were to eat it like you're in a hurry because your time has come. Your hour of deliverance has come. Those are my words. But they were to eat it with their waist skirted and their sandals on their feet. It was not like we're sitting down to Sunday dinner and then we're going to watch a movie afterwards. It wasn't that kind of thing. So he gave Moses and the elders instructions on the Passover lamb. Of course, they were to take the blood of the lamb and put it over their doorposts so that the angel would pass over them. All right? And so we see the actual plague happening, and we see that there was all firstborn died, whether it was in Pharaoh's house, whether it was in the stable, out in the field. So even the animals, the servants, if you were a foreigner in the land. And then we see that finally Pharaoh says, go. All right. And so we actually get to see the Exodus happening, and it's 430 years to the day that the children of Israel left. Okay. And not just them, but a mixed multitude of people left with them. So there were other people in the land who were not Israelites, and they saw what was happening, and they were like, we're out of here too. And the word notes that there were 600,000 military men that were among the Israelites, okay? In chapter 13, we see the laws begin to become established, okay? So the Israelites are a people. Now the Lord is taking them out to a new place, right? And so now we're going to have a whole set. You can't take the old ways of doing things and the old mentality into the new land, right? All right, so Moses was asked to consecrate all the firstborn. Then we see some feasts being talked about. So the Lord brought them out, and he took them to the wilderness of the Red Sea. Okay? And the word says that he did that instead of taking them by the land of the Philistines, which was closer. So he took them a long way so that they wouldn't have to pass through the land of the Philistines. Why? Because the Philistines were a warfaring people, and the Lord did not want them to see war. The Lord knew where their mind was. Okay, they had, enslavement is a thing that affects the mind, right? The Lord knew that they did not have the mind of warriors. He knew that the moment they saw anything hard, they would want to give up and turn back. So he did not take them that way. Okay? And here in chapter 13, we see the word says, Moses had the bones of Joseph with him. Remember, Joseph had said at the end of Genesis, when you leave here, take my bones with you. Okay? So Moses did what Joseph asked. He took his bones with him. All right, so I want to read these verses to you. Verse 21 of chapter 13 says, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and night. He didn't want them to stop. He wanted them to keep going. Verse 22, he did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night from before the people. The Lord said he was going to go with them, and he kept his word. Okay, so chapter 14, Red Sea crossing. The Lord led them specifically to camp by the sea. And so he already knew. He told Moses, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. But yet still he took them to what looked like a dead end. What are we going to do at the sea, Lord? Right? But he would harden Pharaoh's heart to pursue them, and this here is God's words. So that I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. Of course, they began to complain against Moses, as they knew that Pharaoh's army was pursuing them, right? So Moses said to the people, this is verse 13 of chapter 14, do not be afraid. I love this so much. Do not be afraid. Stand still. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. And many of us know this, the second part of this. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. When the Lord destroys that enemy that's been coming up against you, it's a done deal. You shall see that thing no more again forever. Trust in God. Moses said, stand still. So I say to you, stand still. Verse 14, the Lord shall fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. How many of you know that you can be at peace in the middle of the storm? Jesus in the boat with his disciples, he was sleeping on a pillow. He was deliberately at peace. When you draw a pillow, you have purposed in your mind that you are going to go to sleep. You shall hold your peace. Kind of lets you know that in order for the Lord to really effectively conquer that thing in your life, you have to hold your peace. And you can't doubt and have peace at the same time. Without faith, it's impossible to please God, so relax. God told Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. But at this point, you see, Moses had seen the power of God in this action, stretch out your hand. There's many a times before the Lord had told him, stretch out your staff. So this is what Moses did. Verse 19 says, and the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them. Because what was behind them? Pharaoh's army. So the angel of God went behind them to put a shield behind them. Oof. And verse 21, part of it says, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night and made the sea into dry land. So when he says that he will make rivers in the wilderness, he can do anything. He can make dry land in the middle of the sea, literally. He can raise up the waters on the sides and you're walking by. I always picture this, you guys, for myself. Man, when like how I dream that I have the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, I often think about, wow, what it would have been like to walk on dry land through the sea. And you see the waters. Now, these are deep waters, right? You see the waters raised up like skyscrapers on either side of you. Like, wow. I picture this, like this comes to life to me when I read it. Verse 24, in the morning watch, the Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians. So the Lord had now had his eyes on them. 26, then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea. What I found interesting here is the Lord turned and he looked at them, right? He looked at Pharaoh's army. But I want you to notice that, yes, he looked on them, but then he said to Moses, stretch out your hand. Do we think that the Lord's hand is too short and he couldn't have done what he wanted to do to the Egyptian army? No. But he wanted Moses to do it. This is how the Lord builds confidence in us. All right, so verse 31. Thus, Israel saw the great work. Israel saw the great work which the Lord had done in Egypt. So the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. This still applies today. The Lord is still going to want to partner with some people to show his great work. Maybe you. Don't be afraid to stretch out your hand. So in chapter 15, we see the Song of Moses and the Song of Miriam. They're on the other side of the Red Sea. And now they're celebrating. They're celebrating their freedom and deliverance by the hand of God. Because they didn't get up one morning and decide to pack and leave Egypt. It was the hand of God that brought them out. Okay? All right, so 3 days journey into the desert. 3 days after this miracle at the Red Sea, they encounter bitter waters. They couldn't drink the water because it was bitter. And what do you think they did? They started complaining and doubting. Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, and it made the waters turn sweet. Okay, so chapter 16, we see the manna falling from heaven. All right, they were in the wilderness of sin at this point. We see them longing for pots, the boiling pots in Egypt, and the bread. And the Lord responded by sending quail. He just caused quail to fall into their camp. And then they woke up the next day and there was manna on the ground. Okay. God tested them Here it is. I've given you sweet water to drink. You've got quail. Now you have bread falling from the sky. Are you going to believe that I'm your provider? So he gave him instructions. You're to collect only what you need each day. If you keep it overnight, it grew maggots, because of course some of them did not believe and they decided to stock up. It grew maggots. But here is the thing: before the Sabbath day, that the previous day they were to collect double the amount they needed. And guess what didn't happen? It didn't grow maggots. So sometimes the Lord is going to give you just what you need, and you're to take just what you need. All right? So he tested them to see, were you going to believe that, yeah, it fell this morning. I'm going to cause it to fall tomorrow morning too, so don't take double. And then the Lord told them to collect an omer of this manna. They were to keep it so that they would remember this provision of the Lord. They would put it, I believe they ended up putting it in the ark as a memorial to what happened with the manna. All right, so in chapter 17, we see water again. They had no water to drink. What they do? Start complaining against Moses. Why'd you bring us out here? Did you bring us out here to die in the desert, right? So the Lord said to Moses, behold, I will stand before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it that the people may drink. So here's water coming out of a rock. Moses renamed the place Massah and Meribah, because Massah means tempt, and Meribah means content, because they were contending with God. Here it was, God was providing in every single way: food, light, guidance, protection, right? They were still contending with the Lord. They were still tempting God, right? At this point, they encountered the Amalekites. The Amalekites came out to fight them, and the Israelites won as long as Moses held up his staff. Okay, so whenever his hand got tired and it came down, the Amalekites began to beat him. So Aaron and Hur, Hur, helped to hold Moses' hand up so that they would win. God told Moses to write this down in the book and to recount it in the hearing of Joshua. These were his words: recount it in the hearing of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Here, to me, this shows that God is preparing Joshua for succession. He's preparing Joshua to take over when Moses leaves off. All right. In chapter 18, we see Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, coming to visit. And he brings with him Zipporah, Moses' wife, and Moses' sons, Gershom, and Eleazar. Okay, so Moses had left them behind to go and accomplish the exodus out of Egypt. So Jethro watched Moses, okay, and he saw where, Moses would sit from morning till night, and the people would come to him and bring him issues and stuff like that, and he would, give advice and hand out judgments, right? Jethro saw that this was exhausting, so he said to Moses, this is not sustainable. You need to put people in charge. So appoint men that will be leaders over thousands and hundreds and 50s and 10s, right? Have them judge the small matters. Whatever they can't determine, then have them bring it to you. But you can't sit from morning till night and do this. It's not sustainable. So Moses took his advice, right? In chapter 19, we see that the Israelites came to Mount Sinai, and they were told to prepare to meet with God. So the Lord descended up on the mountain, right? And Moses went up to talk to him. And God was so serious, he sent him back down, like, tell them not to touch this mountain. Right? So in the beginning, when Moses encountered him at the burning bush and he said, take off your sandals, the ground you're standing on is holy. Here we see again, because the Lord was descending upon this mountain, only the people that he ordained to meet with him could touch this mountain. It was that important. The Lord sent him back down to warn them. Even though Moses was like, yeah, I told them. Right? Okay, so in 20 is where we see the Lord giving Moses the 10 commandments. And I'm going to go through them just because we're talking about them. First, you shall have no other gods before me. Lowercase g, because we know there's only one God. 2, make no idols for yourself. Make no idols for yourself. One of the reasons why we're not allowed to see God, besides the fact that we could not survive that experience, we could not survive in front of God's glory like that, in these bodies that we're in. But another reason is that we're not supposed to make any images of God. We're to know God by his character and by who he is to us. And, you know, those who worship him, God is spirit. Those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Okay? So make no idols for yourself. 3, don't take the Lord's name in vain. There is power in God's name. And we're not to use it all willy-nilly, and we're to give his name the reverence. We're to hallow his name. That's sacred. Number 4, remember the Sabbath day to make it holy. Remember that in Genesis, on the Sabbath day, the 7th day, God rested from his works and he sanctified it. He made that day holy, and we're to do the same. The Lord wants us to remember that. 5, honor your mother and father so that your days may be long upon the land. Jesus was, when he dealt with the Pharisees, one of the things he said to them is, oh, you want to talk about all these laws? You who say that anything that you'd have given to your parents is korban, meaning it belongs to the Lord, it's a gift to the Lord. You want to use the Lord to dishonor your parents, like, no. Okay, so you're to honor your mother and father. 6, you shall not murder. These are the shall nots. 7, you shall not commit adultery. 8, you shall not steal. 9, you shall not bear false witness. 10, you shall not covet your neighbor's, fill in the blank. You're not to covet your neighbor's anything. Okay? All right, so I think I'm going to stop it here, but I'm going to make this the first part. So please come back and join me for part 2. Okay?